So if you're a fearful avoidant attachment style individual and you saw the title of this video, I'm going to guess that you probably clicked on because you're like, I think this is going to sound exactly like me. So, as a fearful avoidant, you're probably very familiar with what a one-way relationship is. And a big part of this is because your subconscious patterning or programming is largely designed to invest in and feel the most comfortable, safe, and secure in one-way connections. In this video, I want to take you through the crucial reasons for why. And if you stick around until the end, I'll give you two really important reconditioning tools so that you can stop doing this in your life. So first and foremost, fearful avoidants grow up in a household where they generally are rewarded for one-way connection. Maybe, for example, you grow up with a parent who's an alcoholic. And as a result of that, in this household, you are the caretaker of that parent. Now, you as an individual child probably are not being seen and heard. Like, for example, let's say you love art, or let's say you love building creative things. You probably don't get truly seen and heard as a creative person with this, beautiful skill of self-expression if you have a parent who's an alcoholic. There's no room for that. They can hardly put one foot in front of the other themselves, let alone truly meet your needs. And so what you're probably going to see as a byproduct of that is that you grow up and you don't feel like your individual needs are seen and heard. However, where your needs do get seen and heard, at least in an indirect way, is if you caretake for that parent who's an alcoholic. So maybe they're drinking too much, you make them some dinner, you tuck them into bed, and maybe they, give you a little pat on the head and say, thank you, I love you, I appreciate you when you are meeting their needs. Now, there's many variations of this. If you're a fearful avoidant attachment style, could it be that you had a parent who was depressed or a parent who constantly emotionally offloaded onto you? Or it could be that you grew up in a family dynamic where you were the caretaker of the whole family. You were the caretaker of the younger siblings. I mean, there's many variations of this. But at a very young age, you likely got imprinted that if I meet others' needs, then I get loved. And there's no conditioning for you to be seen as an individual with your own unique needs, or at least there's generally very little conditioning of this, for your needs to be seen, heard, understood, validated, and be attuned to, and to have your parents or caregivers present to them without you earning your way there, without you first being something that the parent needs from you or that the family system needs from you. And so as a result of this, you get deeply conditioned to invest in one-way relationships. You think love is when you've earned love. You think that, connection is when you give, and that's how you build that connection. You don't realize that, hey, connection is also about you being seen, you being known, you being understood as the unique individual that you are. And so at a very young age, this is quite possible our attachment style can change over time. I do want to say like one honorable mention. You could be like an anxious, preoccupied person, for example, get into a whole bunch of really tumultuous relationships, maybe with narcissists over the course of a decade and become an FA, right? Like that kind of stuff happens. And in those cases, you're going to see that same conditioning, right? Even as an adult, you get rewarded from the narcissistic partner if you are doing what they want from you, if you are meeting their needs, and your unique self isn't being seen, heard, cared for in that same way. So you're going to see this pattern follows in a vast majority of circumstances, but the root pattern is the same. And so these one-way relationships of you overgiving and under receiving, you taking care of other people's needs before your own, you really only feeling like you're receiving love when you're caretaking for other people or meeting their needs during difficult times. This may have a huge output on your personality, a huge impact on who you become. Now, there's beautiful parts of this. I mean, fearful avoidance generally, because a lot of this common patterning can be more empathetic, can be more, aware of other people, can be really attuned to other people, can understand people. There's lots of nice things that come of it, but there's some hard parts. And one of the hardest parts is that deep down, it's often scary for you to be seen. Deep down, you really sharing your true self and being vulnerable is probably something you don't do with very many people. In fact, it may just be like one or two people here or there over the course of decades, right? And so, we have to break this cycle, because here's what happens when you overgive and under receive, or you constantly caretake at the expense of yourself. You get burnt out, you withdraw, you sabotage, and eventually you feel resentful too or angry because you feel like, okay, well, there's my needs are not being met in the same way back. Now you have to remember that if you come from a set of conditioned patterns like this, you have to remember that you're going to be excellent at being attuned to other people and their needs because you were essentially conditioned from a really young age to become really good at this. It's like you're an expert at this. Not everybody else has the same conditioning. All other attachment styles don't have the same conditioning. APs have definite slivers of it and definite components of this in their own way. But, DAs don't have this, securely attached people don't have it, and APs don't generally have it to the same degree in all situations as fearful avoidance do. So, what you have to realize is that part of your healing, okay, is learning two major things. Thing number one is that you have to be okay with being seen. You have to practice vulnerability. You have to let people know what your needs are, what your boundaries are, what your truth is in relationships. And if you don't do this, you're going to constantly feel let down. Now, this is a huge part of communication. And there's a really powerful reprogramming tool you can practice, which is exposure work. You can practice communicating intentionally in little short snippets, like one thing a day to somebody you love or to somebody you care about or to somebody you're trying to build a relationship with. And over time, your subconscious stretches out its comfort zone and communicating and receiving become safer. There's a second thing too, but I just want to touch on this first thing for one more moment. Um, a lot of times we have fears around being seen as fearful avoidance, right? You can be afraid that, oh my gosh, if I express my need and somebody doesn't meet it, I'm going to feel really disappointed. And so I don't want to expose myself to that, or nobody cares about my needs, or if they care about me, I shouldn't have to explain my needs to somebody. But at the end of the day, you usually actually just have shame around your own needs, like not necessarily the surface needs, but the real deep ones. A lot of fearful avoidance are programmed with shame. So you have to work through that idea that your needs are shameful because they're not. You might have felt a sense of shame as a child when you also needed something, when you were giving to others, but you also needed something and you couldn't get it. Like sometimes there's this innate feeling of, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me that my needs won't get met. And we can have a lot of internalized shame in children because of that. But at the end of the day, the most important component there is that you may feel like that, but it doesn't mean that your needs were ever shameful. It just means that your circumstances you were in didn't have the capacity to meet your needs at the time. It doesn't make you shameful. It makes those your circumstances. It doesn't make that who you are. And so it's really important to disconnect those things by challenging that idea through repetition and emotion. Like, I am worthy of acceptance. I deserve to have my needs seen and heard, not this constant feeling of shame that you let just cause you to withdraw and to hide. If you want to do a deeper dive, by the way, into this, you can for free for 7 days. It's more than enough time to get through this course. There's a whole course about reprogramming shame and just getting that out of your subconscious system. And it will help you feel a lot more confident, a lot like greater self-esteem in your life as a whole as well. So I'll put the link down below if you want to check that out for free for 7 days. If you go in there, take the course, cancel before day 7, you never get charged for anything. So you can definitely go scope that out. The other really important component of reprogramming this one-way relationship dynamic is not only to like communicate yourself and share yourself without fear and without shame, but it's also to be able to practice receiving. A lot of fearful avoidance, you struggle to receive. And you have to look like, why are you scared to receive? Usually it's these ideas that are deep in there in your subconscious mind that are things like, if I receive, I will be a burden. If I receive, I'll be taking too much and then I'm bad. If I receive, then I'm going to rely on somebody and then they're going to eventually leave and I'll be helpless. Like there's these painful ideas because of your past, but just because those were your past experiences, it doesn't mean that that's going to be all the experiences you have going forward. There's a great old Wayne Dyer quote, and he talks about, I don't remember it exactly, but he talks about how you can't drive a car by only ever looking in the rearview mirror, right? And the quote is there to be an analogy to say your future isn't exactly your past, right? Like we can't keep looking to the past to assume that that's forever going to be our future. There can be components of it, but if we keep expecting our past to be our future, then we're also going to keep creating that because that's what happens at a subconscious level. Is what we're projecting, we feed into, and eventually that becomes created. So we have to be able to separate out for that and realize the differences between somebody being a shameful person or their needs being shameful versus you having circumstances that made you feel that way, but that not actually being an accurate representation of the truth. Or you being in a position where you felt like you had to earn your worth that doesn't mean that your whole life should be about that. That just means that that's something you experienced. So being able to separate these things out and retrain our subconscious mind to see ourselves differently and the world differently is a massive, massive step towards healing. And honestly, the root cause way of dealing with one-way relationships. We could put an honorable mention there for like, hey, make sure you vet people, make sure you see that people are willing to give and show up for you too, and make sure that you ask the right questions when you're dating people or building friendships or letting them into your lives. But at the end of the day, those two root things are to get rid of the fear and shame around being seen and around having needs and to practice actively receiving. And this is what stops you from reliving those past experiences over and over again. So I hope this makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, you can check out that reprogramming shame course for free down below. And thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this channel, please consider subscribing, joining me here. I put a daily YouTube video out 7 days of the week, 365 days of the year. So would love to have you in here so you don't miss anything. And thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, and for stopping by.